welcome everybody to this first part of the Collaborations for Future series on unexpected encounters. I'd say a very warm welcome to you. To the people watching from home, a warm welcome to you too. I'll say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening on whichever part of the day that you're watching this from. I'm very happy to see you all here at Pakhuis Zwijger as we're about to embark on a journey together, I would say, tonight, because this is an interesting conversation that we're going to have. Now, before I tell you a little bit more about that, I'll first introduce myself. Hi, my name is Zwijger. A little bit about my background is that I am a former United Nations youth representative for the Netherlands. I'm a co-founder of an intergenerational network called 2100, but above all, I'm very delighted to be your moderator for tonight. Because as I already said, we're going to have a very interesting discussion tonight about a very interesting topic. I'm actually very curious to know what motivated each and every one of you to be here tonight, but it will not have slipped out of your attention to see that we're going to be speaking about feelings, and especially feelings and emotions that we have surrounding the climate crisis. I mean, I think the momentum and the timing to have a conversation like this is in a way perfect, but also because of not such good reasons. Who here is following the developments at the International Climate Conference at COP? I see some hands. Okay, I see a lot of hands. Never mind, people do. You were in denial for a bit there, folks. I mean, not to make a joke. Not to make a joke about it or out of it, but of course there's a lot happening surrounding this, and there has been a lot happening for a very long time. The science is very clear. We're not where we're supposed to be. The negotiations right now are not too optimistically looking. So what does that do for us as human beings with our emotions and our feelings? And then in return, how do we deal with that? Well, this and more is what we will discuss today. And this is all part of the new Collaborations for Future series. So Collaborations for Future, it's a design research program which really is created to intertwine professional designers and climate scientists to address the urgent challenges of the climate crisis. And I should say the Collaborations for Future series is the one that will dive deeper into feelings surrounding climate change, but also how we talk about climate change, how we embody it, how we see it, and much more. So this is the first part of a series, but more to follow. But I will leave some suspense there because we will have an amazing speaker in a little bit to tell you a little bit more about that. What I will say is that for this first episode, we have a myriad of amazing speakers. So in a little bit, we will have scientists, we have therapists, we have activists in our panel. So when you talk about unexpected encounters, I think that is exactly what we will be embodying tonight. And I think what to me, and this is maybe my personal take on this, what is so important when it comes to talking about our feelings and our emotions and our mindset and our attitude towards the climate crisis is that it, for one, is very important for how we maintain ourselves. So how are we feeling? How are we doing as individuals and humans in the world, individually, but also collectively? But I also think as a movement, if you consider yourself part of the climate movement or an activist movement, it is so important that we have a bit of awareness with regards to how we feel. I have a very good friend of mine, and she always tells me about the story, the parable of the choir. Do people know about the story? Yes, that's a win for me because then I get to tell you. So basically the parable of the choir is that a choir, so people that sing in a choir, they can hold a tone for eternity. So until the end of days. And the reason why is because people within the choir, they know that when they need to take a moment to take a breath, that they can stop holding their tone, they can take a step back, and they can take a breather for themselves. And then when they're ready to join the choir again, they can do so, and that way the tone can hold on for eternity. And this good friend of mine, she always says that the climate movement to her is very much like a choir. We're all collectively trying to bring change together, but we can't do that forever. We also need to have moments where we take a breather, where we take a step back, rest, so that we can rejoin the rest of us. And if we all do that collectively, then we can keep this work, you know, going on, and we can keep on pushing for change forever. I hope that we don't need to do that forever. Of course, that's very much the reason for activism not to. But still, the only way that we can do that, and the only way that we can keep this going on together, is if we are in touch with what we're feeling, because that is the only way that we can be, you know, aware of the fact in the first place that we need to take a breather. So that is, I think, what tonight also embodies for me. But enough about that. I would like to hear from you guys as well before we start. And to do that, I have devised this little game. It's actually pretty straightforward. In a little bit, I have a couple of statements which I will read to you. And if the statement applies to you, or if you agree with it, then you may stand up. And if you disagree with the statement, or if it doesn't apply to you, then you remain seated. Everyone gets it? Yes, I see nodding heads, so we're going to put that to the test. My first statement is, I understand the rules of this game. You show me. There you go. Very good job, folks. I'm just trying to see if there's this one lost soul that didn't pay attention. No, everyone got it. Amazing. You may sit down again. Now we're going to start with the real sentences, with the real statements. The first statement I have for you is, fear is a driving emotion for me. And what I mean with that is that you may stand up if fear surrounding the climate crisis is something that drives you rather than something that paralyzes you. So if you are thinking about the climate crisis and you think that fear is a driving emotion for you, stand up. If it paralyzes you or if it sort of stops you in your action, remain seated. This is interesting. Okay. Everybody freeze, because now I got you. Now I want to hear why you stand up. And yeah, I have photographic memory. I don't, but I will try and remember who was seated and standing up. You agree? So fear drives you?
Yeah, sometimes, especially in the middle of the night, I wake up and then I'm suddenly very anxious about the future. Yeah. And then I think, okay, tomorrow I'm going to do this or that. Or yeah. Okay, so that's why.
Yeah, so literally it's like what sort of keeps you going. I also see, thank you so much for sharing, by the way. I also see some people that remain seated. Hi. I'm sorry, I have a tendency to go for people that avoid eye contact. I'm joking. Would you like to share? You remain seated. Is fear something that sort of blocks you in your action, or is there a different thing that it does for you?
Actually, I wasn't sure if I should stand up or not. I think I do that maybe not in actions when it comes to climate crisis, but to other things in my life. But with climate crisis, I feel like I do not have the tools or anything to actually take an action.
Right. So it's not as much about fear, it's just about knowing what to do in the first place.
Yeah.
Okay, clear. Maybe somebody else? Sorry, no, I'm joking. You also remain seated. Would you like to share why?
I was kind of halfway, and then I thought, no, I think I'm going to remain seated. Why? Yeah, I'm kind of in between. I think fear can be quite a good driver, but if the topic is really just climate change, then it's too big to not be to be kept down, kind of.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's why.
I get it, thanks. Would you still like to share? Because you did stand up.
I think it's a fear for what the world could look like if I don't do anything. So that's, then I want to help to change.
Yeah. Okay, thank you all so much for sharing. I have another statement, so you may all sit down again. The next statement I have is a little different. And it's also a bit serious. Not that the other statement wasn't serious, but I am curious to hear from you who is hopeful and optimistic that we can tackle the climate crisis. Please stand up if you are and remain seated if you're not. Okay. Oh, you were quite confident in the standing up.
So it's also a coping mechanism, I guess, because if I can be hopeful, I can stay optimistic. So I'm not sure whether it's realistic, but it helps.
What does it help you with?
To stay hopeful, basically, to not get depressed.
Right. I get that. So I'm trying to understand. I have conversations sometimes with friends, and maybe you have the same thing in your environment. I tend to do the same thing to you. So if I was seated in the audience, I would have also stood up, and precisely for the same reason. Whereas I have a friend of mine, and he's like, I am in no way hopeful, because embodying that there is no hope is the most clearest call for urgency there is to act. How do you sort of reflect on that message?
So I'm not sure whether that's accurate, basically. Yeah. So I can imagine, perhaps it's a bit of self-delusion, but perhaps it's also the biggest chance we have. Yeah.
Okay. Quite clear. Thank you for sharing. Let me check over here on this side. You also stood up. Tell me.
I did. Well, looking at the businesses, I would say I'm not hopeful, but just being here in this room with people that sit here and we're talking about this right now, or being on the street with people, makes me hopeful. Okay. And I think that's it, really the people driving me. Yeah.
It's also the focus that you have on people that are sort of like putting their best foot forward, hopefully, to do more. Okay, thanks. You remain seated. Would you like to share why?
Yeah. I'm not really realistically hopeful, but I do agree, like what you said, that what your friend could say, like that actually, yeah, like maybe we will all die, and why not then keep fighting? Yeah, that sounds maybe very horrible, but that's like how I look at it in a weird way.
I mean, I hear you, everyone. No, I get it. So it's like for you, it's embodying the situation where we're at, which you say just very objectively doesn't give me hope. So that is why I'm going to try and create hope.
No, I'm going to still keep going because it doesn't make sense to stop, right? It's like keep going. Yeah.
True. Okay, thank you all so much. You may all sit down again. Of course, this is just a little sneak preview into some conversations that we will have tonight with each other. Thank you so much for sharing. Also, I want to mention two more things. One is a practical housekeeping thing. We have Bernard here, our amazing photographer. Can we get a big round of applause for Bernard, everyone? Now, Bernard will be taking pictures. If there's anybody that doesn't want to be on the photograph, you may raise your hand. Maybe it's a little out in the open if you have to do it now. So you may also find somebody from the organizing team, which could be me or it could be Volkert at any point. And if you really don't want to be on it, then we'll make sure that you're not visible in any pictures. So if that's the case, no worries. Then just let us know. We'll take care of it. One other thing that I want to mention. I had another housekeeping rule, but I actually think it was only one. So that means that we're going to get started very quick. No, I remember it. I really want to ask you guys tonight, but I'll repeat that in a bit, to really be part of this conversation. So in a little bit, we'll have a presentation to really set the scene for today. And then after, we'll have a panel. But please, during the panel, if you have any questions or if you have a take on something or something is being shared that really resonates with you or that you perhaps disagree with, just share it. This should be sort of a collective conversation that we have tonight. That's the last thing I'll say, because it's about time that I give the floor to somebody that can set the scene and lay the foundation for this evening perfectly for us. So I'm very glad to welcome to the stage none other than the following person. She is a designer, researcher, and advisor at her own studio, and she's the co-founder of Foundation We Are. Please give her a big round of applause. I'm talking about Cornelia Dimitrova, everyone.
Good evening, everyone. It's really, really, really great to be here. I think I should stand here. It's really just wonderful to see you all, to have this first event of a series of 5, where we're going to break down and explore how different professions respond to climate change. My name is Cornelia Dimitrova. I'm co-founder of Foundation We Are, also recently director of Foundation We Are. And what I want to tell you about is a project that we call Collaborations for Future. It's a program, it's an experiment, it's a playground, it's a place where we, together with 10 designers and 10 climate scientists, will work together to find out what kind of new collaborations we need. How can we actually collaborate together? In this sense, we call it the Laboratory for Unexpected Collaborations. And what it is, in very simple terms, is the place where 10 climate scientists will work together with 10 designers for a period of 9 months in quite a free way. They will not have to in advance explain what exactly they will be doing. They're free to meet each other, to learn about each other's work, and to choose a direction that they would like to go towards. It's an experimental program. It is not about knowing what exactly it's going to lead to, but it's about finding it out together. And that is something that me as a creative person, but also the scientists and all the designers, don't often have this kind of free space, which means that we have to take it very seriously. And in setting up this program, part of what it means to take it seriously, of course, is how you structure that playground. What are the rules of the playground? Who gets to join the playground? Part of that setup was, of course, meeting and finding all the scientists who would be willing to be part of such an adventurous space. And of course, if you're here and you're feeling anything related to climate change, it means you know that we live in times of climate change. And as I got to set up this program over the last few months, I got to talk to many different kinds of scientists. And what triggered me is that I started to see them as a group of people who have their ear at a certain point of this planet, or have their finger in a certain pulse, or have their gaze directed at a certain process. And it is in this way that I got to see them as a group of people who are very passionate to find out what exactly it is, this thing we're looking at, climate change. Is it all these particles in the atmosphere? Is it all those emotions in our hearts? Is it the history and the future of oil? Where is it exactly? Is it in the clouds? Is it in the ground? Is it in our cars? And of course, this question of the century, to me at least, and to many designers, is how are we going to live together in times of climate change? A big question, a question that is perhaps all of our responsibility, a question that no one can really answer. It's going to be all of our collective actions or inactions that will answer this question. But what brought us to work on the Collaborations for Future project is that no matter what happens tomorrow, after this, the most recent COP, or the next one, or all the other decisions that we take in our lives, whatever happens, one thing is sure, and that is we're going to have to work together. And the question is how? As I mentioned, as creatives and as researchers, we have reached the limit of what we can do in our current ways of working, in our current commissioning models, in our current collaboration forms. I think I'm going to have a sip of water, and then I'll tell you more about it. Yeah, I find it really exciting to be telling you all about this, because I usually get to talk with it on this project with people who are mostly involved in it, or people who are from the design sector, or people who are from the scientific sector. And as we were having the dinner earlier, I realized, oh my God, we're in such a bubble already. We are so deep into talking between this binary of climate and design that I forgot how to explain about this project to people who are not from this binary space. And this is exactly why we wanted to have these events. The first one is with psychologists, therapists, people who are very attuned to how we talk about our feelings around climate change. The next one will be with journalists, about how do we talk, how do we write about climate change. Also very important. So, Collaborations for Future has 3 important parts which will actually help us to answer this question of how can designers and climate scientists work together. To do this project, of course, we at Foundation VR could never do it alone. It is thanks to people from NIOS, KNMI, PBL, the University of Utrecht, and TU Eindhoven, the researchers that are collaborating in our project, the social design Showdown and Pakhuis, who are helping us in bringing that story further, and all the things we will find. And of course, we have the tremendous privilege and responsibility of carrying the project and carrying the research around these collaborations. There are 3 parts of the project. What you see in the middle are 10 waves, which are the 10 collaborating couples. Every time those lines intersect is when we will have an internal reflection meeting. This is when the 20 people who are having quite a unique experience come together and talk about what does it actually mean to be working together. What is science to you? What is design to you? What can we do together? What is actually the shared agency we can find? It is in this way, by talking about this experience, that we can learn about how perhaps the current system needs to change to make more of these collaborations possible. And every time the lines expand, we're having a public program. As I mentioned, I wouldn't want that we end up in an echo chamber between I'll make it pretty, you make it true, and there we go. No, it is all about understanding that all of us, in all different professions, have to reinvent what our professional ethics and responsibilities are, what our collaborative relationships are. And so that means taking up that responsibility and asking those questions, researching, being meticulous about it, being precise about it. This is really the recipe behind it, and we will publish several articles along the way that share the insights we have gathered so that they can be used by other practitioners, other organizations responsible for designers and scientists, but also, hopefully, policymakers. This is really the ambition we have. I wanted to tell you a little bit more about how we set up the program, and part of that was an open call, which was wonderful that we got 64 applications. That was more than what we anticipated. But it really enriched how we see actually the importance of what we're doing and why we feel really quite motivated to create more of these collaborations. To take down the 64 to 10 is not an easy task, and it is not a question of numbers. It is not about finding the 10 ultimate best designers in the world. It was about finding what is actually a good candidate for such a program. And to do so, we sat down with a jury, and they helped us reflect on the applications. And finally, the decision was made not based on what kind of adjective sits in front of the name of the scientist and what kind of adjective sits in front of the designer, but actually and what drives their work. We really wanted to make matches based on shared curiosity, a shared practice, and that would be the common ground. Not the outcome they create, but the way they work, the things they look at. And this became the community of inquiry. Those 20 people with whom we have the pleasure to work, to discuss, to reflect. Some of them are here, and I'm really happy to see you. But why I call it a community of inquiry is because we seem to share questions. What started as our way of exploring and researching became a shared way of questioning. Each of them has a personal stake, a personal question for their own practice, for their own discipline. Every time I meet them, this is what gives me hope. I think somebody mentioned it earlier. What gives you hope are the people. It is when I talk to them, when I hear that motivation, that they keep how they work and why they work. That is what helps me deal with climate change. We've been having these wonderful meetings together with them. The research track is also starting to slowly show what exactly you can find out. One of the first insights is that we assume that the bias from one profession to the other would be quite strong. It actually wasn't. Within 2 hours of sharing and talking with each other of why and how you work, why and how you set up projects, the people in the program reported that this actually changed how all their assumptions actually were dismantled simply by having had the occasion of talking with somebody from the other discipline. Now, simply that, if we would just create spaces for more of these, for more people to talk across their disciplines, how much impact would that do, right? And finally, of course, the event. That is where we will aim to share what we've learned across our process, but really connect to other disciplines and expand our own imagination of what does it mean to be critical towards your own profession and to be critical towards the collaborations you go into. And the biggest challenge, at least the one that I feel the most, the one that is always the heaviest on my heart these days, is how are we actually going to make a change? How is this not going to be another beautiful story, another nice project that you put on the shelf? How is this actually going to get right in between the ears of the people in the Ministry of Culture and Science? How is this going to get into the institutions responsible for designers and scientists? How is this going to get into the hands of designers and scientists who want to work differently? This is my biggest hope, that we will be able to achieve that. And to do that, we will need all the allies we can find. So if you think of somebody I should be talking with, please let me know. Please let them know. But for the rest, I'm really excited to give you back the microphone.
Yeah, thank you so much. Please do join me, because I, of course, am not going to let you go away and slip away just yet. First of all, thank you for that presentation. I think you really allowed us to see a lot of the pre-work that has been done, and maybe saying pre-work, not even to this event, but of course it's bigger than us sitting here, but you've shown a lot of the work that is being done. And this is part of that journey, so to say. You mentioned very briefly at the end, when we came to the series that we're doing here, that one of the reasons why you're doing it is to share the lessons that you've learned along the process. But maybe I was going to ask you if you could maybe elaborate on that a little bit more. Could you maybe explain a little bit more as to what the why is of today? Why have we all gathered here together today? Why did you want to organize this series?
Well, for me it was very important that we don't corner ourselves in the binary of design and science. I think
what does that mean when you say that? The binary of design and science, to keep them apart from each other, or?
Well, when you set up a project with such a recipe as how we have done, right? You clearly cut a line in the middle of the room and you say, somebody here is a designer, somebody here is a scientist, and there's no other category.
Right.
And as soon as you cut a group of people into two categories, you create the opportunity for all other kinds of divisions and contradictions, but you also create the space for stereotypes.
Yeah.
You know, you'll make it true, I'll make it pretty, and it's gonna work, and we're never gonna actually connect as human beings.
Yeah. What's the danger of that? I mean, not connecting as human beings, divisions. What are we losing out on when we do that?
Well, I think we're losing on a lot. I think we're losing on a lot of ourselves, first of all, right? When you start thinking of yourself purely from the perspective of a stereotype, or you get placed in a place where you are seen just as a stereotype, I think that limits how you can see your own agency in a room. I think that limits how you see your personal view and how that comes into your work.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it limits a lot indeed.
I think it limits the imagination also. And I think then that would be a pity.
Yeah, it would be, because we need it so much. You've also specifically chosen for this first evening to be about feelings. I mean, you showed us a little bit more about the other episodes that are yet to come, which will be about how we talk about the climate crisis. A series with journalists session will be. There's going to be one about how do we make agreements around the climate crisis, how do we embody it. But specifically for tonight, you chose to start with feelings. Why is that?
Well, if you have seen the first file ever with the draft of the program, it was for a very long time. The first two events had exactly the same title, and that was how do we feel/talk about climate change.
Okay, episode 1 and 2.
It was episode 1 and 2 are always kind of entwined with each other, because I believe the way we talk about things affects how we feel about them, but the way we feel about things also affects how we talk about them. And I don't know if it's that simple to cut the line and to say, which one comes first.
Yeah.
But, I think as human beings, we've probably learned how to feel first, and then we learned how to talk.
Yeah.
So I thought, let's start in a very, very deep place.
With feelings. I like that. That's interesting, actually. I might even want to toss that back to the audience, but there is the existence of time, which is very real. Do we start with feelings and then we form our thoughts and then we form how we talk about things? Or do we, through the talking and through the thinking that we do, form our feelings along the way? It's an interesting point. I would say I'm with your school, but that's an interesting one, and we're going to find out tonight as well. So I'm very happy that that was in a draft and it made it to the existence of this night here together. I do have one more question before I let you off the hook. I was really curious, since this is a first series that we're doing tonight, if you would have to say, when would tonight be a success for you? Or is it already a success by the mere fact that we're all here? Like, what would you like us to take away from tonight?
This is something...
The $1 million question.
I don't know if it's going to be exactly the answer to the question you've just posed, but in my mind, I would definitely like that anyone that ever gets in contact with the project, including the program, the events, anything that we do, that it just gives them that space or that occasion to actually think, hey, what's my agency? What can I actually do? Because what scares me is how there's a range of emotions that can actually disable you from taking any action.
Yeah.
And by creating space to talk about these emotions, you can actually get to the other emotions that do enable action.
Yeah.
Whether that is to stand on a highway somewhere, or whether that is to work even harder on your project. I think it's very important that we feel like we have agency, especially when most of us are not around the table negotiating who's going to be pumping less oil out, who's not.
Yeah, it sort of taps a little bit into what you were saying, right? That even though there's a lot going on, it still brings you hope to see what people are doing. But in order for us to get to what we need to do within the projects that you here as an audience, or if you're watching online, carry, we also got to make sure that we don't get paralyzed by our emotions and feelings surrounding it. Which is interesting, because it's paradoxical at times. You have people that are overwhelmed by their feelings and they're drowning in their emotions, and because of that they're doing so much, and other people, they're in the same overload of emotion and they get paralyzed by it. What do I do? And you stand still, you're frozen and stuck. Well, a bit of a cliffhanger, but we're going to find out more about that tonight. Can I say one thing, by the way? It's a bit random to say also in front of people, but I really like how you answer questions. You really do take a time to think about it and to answer very genuinely. I just wanted to say that I appreciate that, because usually, it's also very tempting, especially if you're seated in front of an audience, to just rush into answering. But I wanted to say thanks. That was very insightful, actually. Sorry. Can we have a big round of applause, everyone, for Cornelia? Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Cornelia will also be here with us in the audience, so if we at any point have a question still for her, or if we need your expertise on the program, on other insights, other things, I think we have the clearance to ask for your expertise and to reel it in for a bit. So that is very much appreciated. Well, a lot of questions have been asked so far, so I think let's just cut right to the chase and go into the panel for tonight. And to do that, I'm very excited to invite to the stage or to the front our speakers for this evening. I will once again ask for your enthusiasm into welcoming them to the front. The first person who I will ask to the front is the following. She is a body-oriented trauma therapist and also connected to Extinction Rebellion. Can I get a big round of applause for Nela Paulussen as the first one? Welcome, Nela. Thank you so much. Very good to see you. Please take a seat. Then going over to the next person who has a PhD in philosophy, political emotions of climate breakdown, which is all about privilege, activism, and climate justice. Can I get a big round of applause for Harriet Bergman, everyone? Harriet, welcome as well. Please also take a nice seat, get comfortable. Going over to the next person who's a postdoctoral researcher at the Institute for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Dynamics and at the Institute for Advanced Study at the University of Amsterdam. Everyone, a big round of applause for Fabian Dablande. There you go, Fabian, welcome. And last but definitely not least, we go over to the director for Natuurcentraal, and he's also affiliated with Climate Psychology Alliance. Please give it up for Rembrandt Zwijger, everyone. Rembrandt, very warm welcome to you. Please also take a seat. So, welcome everyone. No pressure, but I have hyped up all your expertise and experience, and I am expecting you to answer every question under the sun out there with regards to this topic. So I hope you're ready. I'm just checking, does everybody have a microphone? I think that one is Nela's indeed. And maybe Nela, since you're sitting on my right, if it's okay that I start with you. I'm actually a little curious. I mean, this series is all about unexpected encounters, so we want to bring very different people with each other to bring that expertise and see what happens. You're a body-oriented trauma therapist. Can you maybe explain what it is that you do then?
I support people embodying emotions. I support people coming out of freeze states.
Okay.
I support people become more connected to themselves. And also therefore, you know, when you're more connected to yourself, you automatically are more connected to others.
Yeah.
So I support people finding signs of safety. So then that they can allow themselves to land more.
Okay. You have also chosen in the work that you do as a therapist to focus specifically as well on the climate activist movement, social activistic movements. Why have you made that decision? Because it's quite interesting. I dare say it's uncommon too, or is it not? To sort of find, I don't think there are many therapists out there that make the nexus between activism, climate activism, and therapy in that way. Why have you decided to?
I don't think it was like a clear decision. It was just me finding myself becoming an activist and also being a therapist.
Yeah.
And the first like big civil disobedience action that I joined, I was like, oh, this is this is serious. Also to experience, you know.
In what way?
Oh, I found it extremely stressful.
For you, oh, I can imagine. What was the first thing you did? Was it?
It was 2019. It was a big blockade in Amsterdam, Stadhuiderskade, and I was just in one day going from this, like, regular burger. What's it? Citizen.
Yeah.
To being a mom who was actually opposing the police, and you know there were horses and all that.
Yeah.
So it was a big shift.
I can imagine. Yeah.
And the day after, I don't know exactly how it came together, but I met some other therapists, coaches, and we just figured, okay, there is a role for us here in this movement.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was the start also for the community of XR therapists and psychologists.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Because I was going to ask about, do you see a lot of, and I don't know if that's the right word to use, but perhaps it is, do you see a lot of trauma amongst climate activists in the work that you do, in the community that you're a part of? Is it needed?
Not that much. Okay. You mean like, well, okay, there are more answers to this question. In terms of supporting people process actions, joining actions, it's not that much.
Okay.
I think there is a lot of knowledge within the climate movement around doing it together.
Okay.
And that's actually like probably the best antidote to stress.
Yeah.
And
Doing
also
it
to
together.
getting stuck into stress.
Oh, that's interesting. That's
Yeah.
a lesson right there. I'm writing it down.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, we spread information into the movement as well, but sometimes people are surprised by police violence or like more severe legal consequences than what they prepared themselves for. So then it can be helpful to do some sessions.
Yeah, together. And then maybe just to get a bit of an image, because I'm super curious, what would it then look like if you have a session, for example, with climate activists? What helps? Would you collectively get together? Could you maybe talk us through what that would look like?
It's finding the way back to safety. So if we look at stress, how it functions, well, there are some different theories around it, but the one that I really like and also work a lot with is that there is a hierarchy in stress responses.
Okay.
So when we feel safe, we are connected to ourselves, we're connected to others, we feel grounded, we feel present, we feel open, curious, all those things.
Yeah.
When there is a sign of threat, first thing we want to do is protect ourselves. So we either want to fight or flight.
Yeah.
Whole system mobilizes, we get very energetic because we need to do something.
Yeah.
It's very activist
minded, right? Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
And then when we cannot actually fight or flight because it's just too big, then we go into freeze. So there is a ladder, like a ladder. In processing overwhelming experiences, we look for what got frozen, we add safety to it, and then we move down the ladder again. So then when we unfreeze, so to say, that's not really a word. I mean, we also don't freeze as people, but the mobilized energy gets kind of locked in. That's where we feel the despair or the I cannot. And then when we add safety, when we add connection to that, usually all the emotions that we didn't have time for,
they get unlocked.
And then we access that.
That actually, in a way, that I'm quite surprised to hear that, because and maybe this is maybe I have a very toxic definition of activism, but I also think it's the fear and the feeling of unsafety. If we zoom in on the climate crisis, I think it's the unsafety and almost the tragedy of what the implications of the crisis are that fuel and drive most people into being an activist. That I would almost think, if you train yourself into a sense of safety, would it then defeat like the vigor and the strength with which you can pursue your activism, or is that a false dichotomy?
Well, I think both are true. There is unsafety.
Yeah,
it's clear. We all feel that, right? And I mean, I see it as my work to help people feel that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that they can start to act.
Right.
But then, once you're in that modus, we tend to really look at the danger. We tend to really focus on this is unsafe, this is unsafe, this is unsafe, and we almost forget to look. So there are a lot of triggers there, and we tend to forget to look at the glimmers. Which I like that word.
Yeah.
The glimmers are just like the little moments of okayness, and they're always there. There is a moon over Gaza, and I just really hope that the people there have small moments of okayness when they look up and they see the moon. And this is something that we can learn, and that is also what I really feel important. I mean, this is really what drives me, is to help people start to act, and at the same time also act in a way that they can hold themselves, that they know when to step back, that they know what helps them to calm down, that we start to attune more to those glimmers.
Yeah, yeah, I get it. It's also the distinction between, like still being able to see, if I focus on climate activism for that matter, then the okay things that are taking place. I get it. Thanks also for elaborating on that.
Yeah.
You did mention
this. We're here, right?
Yeah.
This is a big glimmer.
Yeah. It is. Thank you so much also, Nela. Fabian, if I can go to you. You're here. Oh, that makes it 10 times easier. One of the things we just noted down is a lesson is doing it together. You're also part of Scientist Rebellion. I was just curious to hear from you. Could you maybe explain why you decided to join Scientist Rebellion? Because I can imagine that there's a difference between, feeling worried about something, feeling driven to do something about a thing that you're passionate about, and then joining sort of a collective to do it. Did you notice a difference in how your activistic work felt when you joined the group? I think also you have your microphone, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Well, and it has to be close to me also. So note to self. Well, maybe I can backtrack a little bit just to situate myself a little bit, right? So I learned about climate change in high school. Yeah. I think many of you did too, depending on your age. And it was about polar bears, and I felt like, okay, this is a big issue, but the politics will sort this out, and we can move on. And so I focused on like individual lifestyle changes, turned vegan, reduced my flying, blah 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 blah. And then when the COVID pandemic hit, and I realized, okay, things can actually change quite dramatically for the worse, right? And the people in power don't really have us covered. And so that forced me actually to look. Because before I bought books on climate change, and I never read them, right? But that incident really forced me to go back to the science, to read the IPCC reports. I was in pandemic isolation with my then girlfriend on an island. We spent like a month just really, it wasn't good for the relationship, really obsessed about climate change. And through that period, I realized actually it's like much worse than I thought. It's like much worse. Not only the impact and the uncertainty, but also what's in the policy options, how we discuss it, what is on the table in terms of policy responses. And then I came back to Amsterdam in the summer of 2021, and I was like, okay, I got it. We need to engage in collective climate action to prevent the collapse of civilization. And I was like, and I went to my colleagues and I was like, okay. And then there was like, it's too big, I can't really do anything. This is, Fabian, you should focus on your PhD, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then I first got a little bit involved in Extinction Rebellion and then helped set up Scientist Rebellion in the Netherlands. It's a kind of global movement. It's in over 30 countries and so on. And we started it in the Netherlands. And there I really felt like, okay, those people get it. They really get it. And they are willing to walk the talk. They're willing to spend some hours in our busy week to try to save the world, it's really the mundane things. And it started with a handful of organizers, 5, 6, 7 people, and now it's like over 500 across the Netherlands, all kinds of universities. Yeah. And so that was really the sense of community that then made it just stick for me, and saying, okay, I'm part of this community. Gives me a lot of strength, gives me a lot of empowerment. Right? Before I was more afraid, right? But now I'm like, okay, we can do this together. And so that sense of community I derive when I do things together. Yeah.
Which is interesting because in a way the science isn't changing per se. If anything, it's becoming more dire, but you get more feelings of empowerment because you're collectively sort of uniting in your actions. Can you also help us just get a bit of just briefly, like a bit of an insight? What are some of the projects, the actions that you do as Scientist Rebellion?
I have some images actually prepared. My man Volker in the back.
Ooh,
yeah.
Nice.
So here, one of the things we did, this is an action organized by Greenpeace and Extinction Rebellion, and we kind of helped mobilize for it. So I gave a lot of direct action trainings. Yeah. And in total, we had like 500 people. Does anybody know this action, by the way? Can you raise your hand if you know it? A little bit? Okay. Well, this was in November last year. And what we did is we collected ourselves in the forest, and we wearing these jumpsuits, so we all look kind of similar. And then we walked very slowly towards the private jet lane in Schiphol. Right? And the idea is that actually there's an enormous carbon inequality in terms of emissions. Right? So the top 1%, 80 million people, emit more than the bottom 50%, which is 4 billion people. Right? So it's not a population problem, it's a consumption problem.
Yeah.
And the billionaires emit 1 million times more than we do, right, on average. So what we did here is we said, actually, let's do something about it. And we went with 500 people onto the private jet lane. There was a fence, you know, and then there was a brief moment of excitement because it was a question of, well, how do we get through the fence? You know?
Yeah.
And then we built like a barrier, and then 2 people with an Akku-Flex kind of jumped open and just cut the fence, you know, and everyone was like, wow. And then we walked onto the we walked onto the private jet lane, you know, 500 people, and the police, they just watched. Yeah, they couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
And then we sat down, and we waited for hours, and then we saw, okay, the New York Times covered it, the Guardian, all newspapers, basically across the world. And the really, I mean, there were 2 wonderful things. One was this video of Dutch people on bikes, you know, biking around, being chased by the police. The activism also has to be fun, you know. You have to enjoy it in some respects. And then we were put into buses by the police. 6 buses, I think, of 50 people. Then in the end, some people went before, and we went to the police station, you know. And we were all being anonymous. Actually, this is being recorded. I might get in trouble. But we were all anonymous, and the police said, "Well, you're too many people. You know, we cannot process you." And then they drove the buses, you know, and they just let us free. You know?
Okay.
So we walked away. And in the bus, we were all singing things like, you know, "We are unstoppable. Another world is possible." You know, these kinds of things. And so this is some of the things we're doing. There are other images. I don't want to talk too much because we have a lot of panelists. But this is the kind of things we're part of, we're mobilizing for. And we're trying to really get, in particular, the academic community, right?
Yeah.
Who has for decades written IPCC reports. And if you've been to an IPCC press conference, it's extremely boring. I mean, it's so boring, it's scary, actually.
Yeah.
Right. So we're trying to mobilize them into direct action, into civil resistance.
But wait. You're talking about you gotta make it fun. 2 people, they pulled out these things and they got open the fence. We're going in there. Were you at any point scared or fearful when you were doing this?
I mean, I was a little bit worried about the legal ramifications.
Yeah.
But that worked out well so far. So yeah, there's I'm incriminating myself, but there's a lot
we might have to cut out this part of the recording.
No, it's
don't we?
I'm being facetious. But I mean, for this action, there was just mostly excitement, actually.
Yeah.
There was not too much being scared.
Yeah.
There were other actions, and I can talk about this another time, where you are scared, actually.
Oh, okay, this is like the off-camera bit, and a little bit everyone huddle around that corner after the show is over for the real deal stories. No, but that is interesting. So do you think, and that's just my final question, just very briefly, if you could, was it the fact that you were there as a group that made all the difference for you, or was it something else?
Well, these things you can't do if you're not a group, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the key insight, that alone, I mean, you're just powerless, you know, basically.
So it's about uniting.
Yeah, it's about uniting together and really saying like, okay, we have to stop the mega machine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that you can only do in communities.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. Harriet, if it's okay, I'd love to go over to you. I already mentioned that you're doing a PhD at the University of Antwerp, and it's about political emotions and climate justice. And then you specifically also make an emphasis on eco-fascism, on anger, violence, and climate racism. Can you maybe explain what this is always a dangerous question, by the way, to ask people who do a PhD, what's your PhD about? Try and explain it. But maybe I'm even more interested on why. Why did you specifically decide to research this?
So I was part of the Dutch or International European Climate Movement. And I found it, when I got the PhD, I found it very important to do something that was actually useful for the movement, but also useful for my own processes of making sense what was going on.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to analyze what I saw happening within the climate movement.
So what did you see happening?
So what got me interested in especially climate racism is when I heard more about this concept of green shame. So feeling ashamed to take a airplane or feeling ashamed to eat meat. And it really reminded me of a concept of white guilt, which is also a very paralyzing and individual concept, right? Like it's you do something wrong. And often as a white person, I often do stuff wrong. But for me to feel guilty about that might not be the best way to end white supremacy or to make a better world. Whereas when I look at where do some of these things come from, then I can see where I can make a difference that's beyond ethics, so beyond who do I want to be, how do I want to behave, and it's more about what should the world look like? How can I make an impact on what the world looks like? So it's more a political question rather than an ethical question. So it's not how do I become good and pure, but how will the world turn out to be a better place? And I realized that rather than only going vegan or only stopping to do whatever destructive things I do, it's not necessarily about not being a racist, but it's about trying to dismantle racist structures. It's not about being a good consumer, it's about destroying capitalism. But so these sort of thoughts really triggered me and made me more interested to do this research. And then the emotional aspect of it was because I think emotions are there's often a binary. I think that's also an interesting conversation to have with Fabian, that academics should be rational, that if we come with the right arguments, people will change their ways, right? We only have to explain clearly enough, and then if people understand what's going on, they will do something.
But that's not the case.
But that's clearly not the case.
Yeah. So what is the case?
So I think the case, this is a very...
multifaceted, complex...
Blah, 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 very complex. But I think one of the main problems is that there is profit to be made out of suffering of others. There is profit to be made by companies like Shell, like Schiphol, like Tata Steel, and they really do not care that much about whether people around IJmuiden get cancer, right? They really do not care that much about what's happening in Bangladesh or what's happening in like social housing here in the Netherlands that's not well isolated. People say, that's not my problem. I'm here for the shareholders. I will give my shareholders their profit, and if you die, meh. Negative externality.
Do you genuinely believe that they don't care? I mean, clearly they're not acting on it. That's a given, because Tata Steel still have their cokes factories that are polluting and making people ill. But I hear you mentioning that almost like financial capital is king, emperor in our economic system, whereas the impact on nature, on society isn't. Not in our accounting, not in our pricing system, but. Is that the reason, or do you genuinely also think that they don't care?
I think there's care is not, it's not you either care or you don't care, right?
Yeah.
Like I care, but I sit here rather than blowing up a pipeline or going to the street right now. I sit here rather than doing actions that might dismantle the structures that are currently, while we sit here, destroying people.
Yeah.
So do I care enough? Well, maybe not. Do I fully understand the impact of what I'm doing or not doing? Maybe not, right? So I think I do agree. I do expect people who work at Shell to care, right? They might even be vegan. They might even decide not to fly anymore. They might even vote for GroenLinks or something like that, right? But do they care enough to give up some of the privileges? Or to change the social scripts they're in, or to say, I will take risks, or I will no longer be complicit in a system that destroys us. And clearly, they do not care enough to do that. So they need a little push.
Yeah. I want to ask you what the push is, but I think I'm going to save that in a little bit. I do want to go to, thank you so much, by the way. Yeah, Rembrandt, I'm going to you because I'm going to ask you, what's the push? I'm joking. No, I was going to ask you, since we're talking about what feelings do, I mean, I already mentioned it when I introduced you, but you're also part of the Climate Psychology Alliance. Could you maybe explain to us a little bit more about what it is and maybe how do you reflect so far on the things that have been shared here? You also have a microphone on the table on your right.
Thanks. Yes, you can hear me.
Yeah.
Well, when it is about feelings, I like to say, like some of you have already said, that for me they are the gateway or the entrance to what I would say is true or truth. So the whole connection for me to Psychology Alliance, Climate Psychology Alliance, is that was the first place in England where I felt that feelings were central, feelings were key. And so it was for me a place where it was the entrance to truth without claiming the truth. So it wasn't like, hey, I'm going to prescribe you what to think or what to do, but it was a place where I could have joint conversations based on feelings. And when it's about feelings for me, I automatically feel safe, because if I need to give the right answer or some kind of information stuff or some clear outcome of research or something that is knowledge or something, then I somehow block because I don't know.
Yeah.
So the feeling side is for me very important. And actually, when I've been involved in environmental stuff as long as I remember, but I was too shy to do the activism. I was more in the educational side.
Yeah.
So there was also in that time, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, evolving understanding of what's going on. And I feel now that the Climate Psychology Alliance, by saying, hey, our motto is staying with the trouble. So it's not, hey, we have to answer or we have to do this, but we help each other to go through this. Like you said, the choir, sometimes somebody can step back and then you can step in again. I experienced that with the Climate Psychology Alliance, which is an organization network in the UK. They started actually with the question, why is it that people are not talking about the climate? And that was about 12 years ago. And that was very much to my heart, because probably if you ask me what I am, I'm probably mostly a philosopher. So I'm always interested in depth or finding out stuff. And they had these questions, and they started with a conference and another conference. They never had the idea to become a big network or a big organization.
Right. Yeah.
It all emerged. It all organically grew, and that's where I felt at home.
Yeah. I like that. I wrote down what you said. Feelings are our entrance to the truth without claiming the truth. Can you maybe just elaborate on that a little bit more? So it's because it's your truth. Is that how I should interpret it, or am I going to?
No. So somewhere in my life, I also did research, because when I was working with organizations, my original profession, being an organizational consultant, was to help organizations to discuss the elephant in the room. So what is not a regular conversation, but what is underneath that people feel and maybe are afraid to express. I was very interested in that. I learned all kinds of stuff how to do that. But then I figured out that if I did that in the Zuidas here, Amsterdam, 5 stories high in a super luxurious office building, or I did it in the dunes, the outcomes would be different. So somehow I started to think, what is the difference then? And it is the environment. So it is the nature that for me became important. And so when I started working with Greenpeace International, I recognize some of these pictures and stuff. Greenpeace always said, "We are the voice of nature." Yeah, of course.
Especially in that deep voice, right?
And then I said, "Okay, how do we know? How is that we know that we are the voice of nature? Nature doesn't speak our language or doesn't write books."
Are we connected as humans to nature?
So then I started to research that and interviewed lots of people that work in practices with nature, like people working with horses or doing advocacy or place-bound. There's also organizations that do ecosystem regeneration, all those kind of practices. I interviewed people.
Yeah.
And I'll give you one anecdote and then stop. So when I interviewed somebody who worked with people and horses, she said, "Well, you shut up, you're in your head all the time. I can't explain what I'm doing. You need to do the work with a horse." Okay, let's go with the horse. So I went to a farm and there were 3 horses, and there was one a little bit crippled, and she asked me, "Okay, you choose a horse." And I went for that one. So why? "Oh, well, because usually I go for the underdog or the underhorse." Anyway, I worked with that horse, and she gave me all kind of exercises. So you go to the horse, and then you make it move. So so I went to the horse. I said, "Dear horse, will you please move?" Nothing happened. "Well, I am Rembrandt, and I really like you, and could you please, for me, do some walking?" Nothing happened. So, to make the story short, I learned that through my body, or also feelings, it's different things, but they're connected, I could start dancing with the horse. So it was not my superhuman language thinking skill, but it was making a different relation. And from then on, I started to understand that the reality, and that's my philosophy and where I try to do the work and invest, is we're not really working with the reality. So in all these questions about the climate, and Harriet is referencing, well, we are all referencing to it, there's something underneath. And that's very difficult to grasp, because it feels like a ghost. Sometimes I have it, sometimes I don't have it. And I have it when I feel safe, but I also have it when I'm in nature, because nature somehow gives an entrance to me to a different aspect of reality. And I think that's where we need to go.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much. Nela, I saw you nodding throughout the story. Is it something that resonates with you, or do you recognize some of the things that Rembrandt mentions?
I was nodding a lot, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. Well, I like the embodiment part, obviously. There was, in the beginning of what you were sharing, Rembrandt, there was, in relationship to the Climate Psychology Alliance, it reminded me of this book of Sally Weintraub, The Psychological Roots of the Climate Crisis. And the subtitle of that book is Neoliberal Exceptionalism and the Culture of Uncare. And I also wanted to respond to you when you, don't know exactly where that was, but there's something so completely off in our society where we think it is normal to not care. And to me, what that shows is trauma. I think, you know, we as humans, we come from centuries of transgression of human rights. And we hold in our nervous system, in our DNA, we hold the imprint of that. As I recently heard someone express it, like as a layer of permafrost within humanity.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And the trauma is the methane that's gonna thaw out of us.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's interesting.
And you know, being in nature just automatically reminds all ourselves of, this is me. I am nature. This, yeah.
Yeah.
And it helps us unfreeze.
Yeah. Harriet?
It's your comment, I don't know, really reminds me of that when you care, you become vulnerable, right? Like when you show that you care, you become vulnerable to something. Yeah. And when you don't care, or when you say, I give up, you can no longer be reached in some sort of way. And I think this is also what's happening when people, for example, give up on preventing climate breakdown, but also when they give up on, for example, Palestine, or when they give up on other things in the world that go very wrong. Yeah. They try to protect themselves in some sort of way by not knowing, by not caring, by refusing to let the information really reach them. Yeah. And something slightly related to this that I find very funny, but is also very sad, is that it's so in the climate movement you often see a lot. It's often commented that you see more women in climate breakdown and climate justice movements, but there's research has been done that women, because they have this experience of vulnerability more often, that they are also more open to the idea of climate breakdown and more open to the idea of we cannot buy our way out of this. We cannot design our way out of vulnerability and collapse. Yeah. Whereas for people who maybe with a bit more entitlement or a bit more security walk on the streets, they do not as quickly grasp that as other groups.
That's interesting. Sometimes I hear people say that it might be generationally shifting as well. Maybe some of you remember the speech that Greta Thunberg did, the How Dare You speech. Can I see hands if people remember? Oh, I see people smiling even. You know what I'm talking about. Actually, I was there. I was a youth representative back then, and I was at the UN the day she gave that speech. And I remember at some point I was waiting in line to enter a room, and there was this bald, older diplomat in front of me, and we got to talking at some point, and when I told him that I was a youth representative, as soon as the word youth had left my mouth, his eyebrows contorted into a deep frown, and then he said, oh, and then I said, yeah, and then there was an awkward silence, and then he said to me, you know, you young people, I think we really saw today, hence referring to the speech that Greta gave, that you're still a little too emotional to deal with these real life problems. I think it's better if you wait until you're a little older before you mingle into these sort of discussions. But it's interesting how we see vulnerability as inadequacy rather than a sort of courage also that allows us to be open to the state of the world and to say, I do care and I'm courageous enough to show it. Nila?
Yeah, I would actually say that vulnerability is our natural state. All the protection is around that, but vulnerability, this is being human.
That's the pure core.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Thank you. I see that we have a question in the audience. I'm going to come over to, would you like to stand, please? Then I'll give you the mic.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can I just say like this? Okay. Yeah. It's very interesting. So my name is Natsuno. I'm visiting Amsterdam for a few weeks, but I live in Eastern DR Congo. I work for Virunga National Park. I don't know if you watched Netflix documentary about Virunga. Maybe you know about this. Yeah. Anyways, the situation has been extremely difficult, and like working in a front line, protecting the forest in a war zone is not easy. And so I have so many questions, but one question is, so one of the interesting things that I learned since I started work with Virunga 3 years ago is that when we try to raise fund online, we have to curate the narratives to protect gorillas and forests so that we can raise more money rather than talking about humanitarian crisis that is happening there. When violence and natural resource trafficking is the biggest driving of deforestation in Eastern DRC. Also political reasons, corruption, international, like geopolitical war, everything. But it seems like people in Europe or in North America, like who are very conscious about climate change and environment, are caring about the gorillas, which is fine, but not really looking at the actual factor of the problems. Right. And it was really interesting to hear what you were talking about Palestine, comparing Palestine. And it was really, my question is like, in your opinion, because I have some hypotheses on why this is happening, but in your opinion, what is the reason? Is this also the feeling? But if it's the feeling, like, what's the reason? Is it racism that white people cannot imagine the pain of Congolese people, or what is it? And then my next
sorry, just to rephrase it. So your question is about the context of Congo protection of this natural forest. There's a big humanitarian reason, which is the biggest reason behind it. But you're framing it in terms of saving nature. So why is that the more preferred sort of route as opposed to?
We have to because that's the way to raise money, that's strategically. But I just don't really understand why. And I have some hypotheses, but I want to hear from your
panel. Opinion. Shall we first do that? And then also, you have another question, but maybe I'll do this. Okay. Why and how? Sorry, because I thought this is already a very good and big first question. So, Nathalie Streck, I see Harriet, you already took your mic. Would you like to respond? Thank you also, by the way, for asking it.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And I have so many things to say, and I will just... But the first thing is, there's this research done about how much painkillers women of color get when they give birth. And they get so much less painkillers, just like people of color are less easily believed when they express they are in pain, which leads to more statistical deaths and more illnesses, etc. So there's this big bias that people of color can carry more pain, which we actually also see in how climate breakdown is represented in different countries. So if I ask you to think about flooding in, for example, Bangladesh, most of the images you see are of people continuing life as usual. So you see people in a boat with their entire household, or you see someone wading through a flooded street. Whereas if you see these very similar events with white people, you see their pain and their distress and their fear. So partly of how we are primed to respond to these things is that we learn in the images we get that people of color can carry more pain, which of course also has a long background of colonialism, white supremacy, racism, etc., that we continue in how we talk about climate breakdown. So how can we talk about collateral damage, right? Or losses when that is about people's literal homelands? Then another thing, you talk about gorillas, the polar bear or the ice bear, a very white bear. That animal is used because most NGOs suffer from the very same problem. The people with money, who are white people, they feel guilty or offended, or they really do not care that much when it is about people they do not recognize, and they care more about animals in need of protection. So everything you say is backed up by data and by analysis. And it's a very sad truth, which I think is why it's so important, for example, when you talk about the problem is not overpopulation, the problem is inequality.
And lifestyle.
And where does that inequality come from? Because we do not care to change it, because we find structural obstacles, because it's difficult to overthrow the people with a lot of money.
Rembrandt, you want to respond? And then
I think it's a great question and a great response. Fully agree. What pops in my mind is that Western societies are completely compartmentalized. So if there's a problem somewhere else, we think, oh, we got the Red Cross for that, or oh, we got the police for that, or oh, we got that for that, or oh, we got that for that. So, and although that is partly true, it sort of breaks the feedback loop or the real information processing and the connection, as we spoke about connection, that there is no connection. Nobody knows that story. So there is no connection. And if you hear about it, maybe in the news, or you see some pictures, it's sort of like, well, tomorrow I need to go to my job. That's a responsible thing to do, difficult enough. And I'm sure our good government, because we're good people, will take care of it. And so there we go.
Yeah.
So I think that's something I like to add, which is not a solution, but I feel that's the situation.
Good point. Yeah. Thank you. Fabian, do you have anything to add, or maybe to the question? Also, I do. You also asked, how do we tackle this? So maybe that's an extra layer, not to burden you with the solution, but no pressure.
Yeah. I would actually just add reflections and dodge the question, but maybe at the end I can also say something about this. But it runs actually very deep also in how we talk about the climate crisis. Right? It is kind of also how I talked about it. Right? It's about the livable future. Right? It's about preventing civilization collapse.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, for many parts of the world, civilization has already collapsed. Right? It was never.
Yeah.
I mean, 1 billion people don't have access to electricity. Right? They are in chronic hunger. Right? 3 billion today are vulnerable to climate change. Right? So it remains a bourgeois issue on some level. Right? And we did an action once more. We just talked on Amsterdam Street on the Dam Square. We just talked to people about climate change, and they were like, "Look, man, I mean, what are you talking about? I have other issues."
Yeah.
Right? And it comes back also in how, and this is what makes me angry actually, is how also the academic community partly has added to this problem. Right? If you look at the IPCC mitigation scenarios, right? They assume, for example, that we can absolutely decouple economic growth from greenhouse gas emissions, from resource use, which is not the case.
Yeah.
They assume technological solutions to suck out on a gigaton scale carbon dioxide, right?
Yeah.
Which is it's not available, right? Yeah. Rather than thinking about how can we change our consumption behavior, right? And the structures that we have learned to live with. And just we once had a conversation with Tejal Kanitka, who does research on these scenarios, and just looking at how do they project forward, right? I mean, these are scenarios that project the future until 2100, right? Yeah. How they project, for example, energy needs in the global north and the global south, right? Of course, there's no convergence, right? Yeah. Perpetuates these colonial injustices. So there's something actually deeply political about how we, also in the scientific community, envision the future, right? So when people tell me, hey, you're not neutral when you block the R12 and so on, I was like, I mean, look at the science,
yeah,
you know?
It's not neutral, so,
so actually, I haven't really addressed the question, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah. Does that answer your question to some extent? Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for asking it too. If anybody else If anybody else has a question, please do let us know. Okay, there's one more there. I actually also have a question to you guys. Sorry, that I want to ask beforehand, because I actually I wanted to, and I'm actually you got me thinking already as I'm asking this. What stuck with me is, Nela, that you said that vulnerability is the purest form, and I am curious if that would also mean that any emotion that then showcases and presents itself is good. And maybe it's not, but maybe it is. And that's actually what I want to ask, because we spoke a little bit about anger so far. And maybe I want to propose this as a statement first to you guys. I'm very curious to hear from you if you think that anger is an emotion that helps in our climate activism. If you believe it is so, then please stand up. And if you think that anger is gonna hinder us in the way to tackling the crisis, then remain seated. And then I will be back with you guys in a little bit. Oh, I got an angry audience. Lots of people standing. Okay, maybe can I ask you? You are standing up.
Yes, I think fear and anger, they are emotions, and like all emotions, you can interpret them badly or wrongly or in a better way. And I think anger is an interesting feeling, because when you see what nature offers and that we are part of nature, and then that you also can see that so many people. And I'm also referring to the small group of billionaires, but everybody, also to myself. It's so much beauty, and that we are not able to enjoy that beauty. And I think this also, and I'm also angry that we're also spoiled Because we oh yeah, that's so what the one thought that I always want to remember every day is that so in the cosmos during billion of years there was almost no life like the one that we have, and then also in all that the fact that we are living here and we also can enjoy the life in this, it's a chance of one of thousands of billions, and we don't enjoy it, and we are spoiled, and I'm that's my anger also. And
Thank you.
Sometimes I'm very angry with myself because I'm just feeling bad because of stupid reasons.
But I hear you, and thank you for sharing that. Also, the miracle that is life, and the fact that we're all here, and that we get to. And I don't know if you interpret it in that way, or if I'm interpreting you right. But there's one livable planet that we have, which is miraculous, and this is what we're headed towards. And indeed, we're not willing to give some convenience, perhaps, up. In our lifestyles to protect something that is so rare and so miraculous. I don't know if that's how you intended it. Yes. Yeah, okay, thanks. Okay, then luckily I did it justice. Thank you for sharing it. I want to maybe go to this side, and maybe I go swerve around the left. So no, I'm going to you.
I have to recall the question again, but I think...
sorry, if anger is an emotion that helps the climate movement, or if it hinders us if we're too angry.
Yeah, I think, but that's just what I realized personally, that anger is just one of the emotions of many, right? And it's just a way about how you communicate feelings. And I think we can learn a lot also in the climate movement on non-violent communication, kind of like communication styles in that regards. Because then you make a division between what you feel and how you communicate that feeling. And I think that's a really big difference of, because the feelings are all like right to be there, I think. Just the way about communicating.
Yeah, but you make a very interesting distinction. So you say, yes, it helps as a feeling as long as that's not what you communicate. Thanks also for sharing. Is there anybody that remains seated? I see you remain seated. Somebody else here. Oh, there in the middle. Oh, no. You were just taking a break. Anybody that remains? Yes. Oh, there. Thank you. Thanks, Rembrandt. Oh, a lot of people. You were just all in my blind spot. Oh, you are not avoiding eye contact. May I ask you? You remain seated.
Yes, I remain seated. Yes, because I mean, doing things out of anger. I mean, you send out a certain energy that you maybe don't want to send out.
What sort of energy, or what would you want?
If you're angry, you're opposing something.
But we should oppose something, no?
Yes, but well, if you want to bridge gaps.
But should we bridge gaps, or should we blow up pipelines, deflate SUVs? Like, for example, if you deflate the SUV, right, just the tires, you don't even have to non-violently communicate.
But
you just have to make sure you don't get caught.
You don't.
Okay, wait.
Sorry, would you? You don't have to be angry to do so.
Your point is because thank you, by the way. Oh, everybody may sit down again. Because if I understand you correctly, and this is also why I chose to propose this statement, is, and I don't know if there is even a right answer, but there are some people that say, if you're angry, can you still try and find a solution with the person that is in front of you, or will you be unable to constructively pave a way forward together? Is that what you're trying to say also?
Yes. That's about bridging the gap.
Yeah.
So you need to... Well, if you care for nature, we're all part of nature. Yeah. Also, if you burn a lot of oil, you're part of nature. I mean, we're all in this together. Yeah. So you can stop things that are not good for... Well, if in the house something happens, you take action because you want to protect your family. Yeah. But you don't have to do it out of anger. You can do things out of love. And that's a different energy.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you all. We're going to get to questions in a little bit, but I actually want to ask...
Can I make a comment?
Yes, I was going to ask you, I wanted to propose a statement to you. Would you all agree? Would you, if I asked you the statement, would you have stood up? Or
yes.
Yeah, all of you? Okay, please do comment. Rembrandt, you want to go first?
Well, some people call this the age of chaos, because we are all in confusion or looking or finding out. And I feel that the emotions are extremely important, they need to be recognized and need to be expressed. Also as a way of finding your way in the chaos and knowing who you are. So I think that sometimes an emotion is so unexpected for yourself that you think, is that me? Maybe you haven't felt it like that before. I think if you connect it to activism, and I speak out of myself, my personal position is that I feel that the climate problem, the climate crisis, biodiversity problem, at some point I'm sort of now certain of myself about my position.
Right.
And in my position, I need to do something. In my position, I'm against.
Yeah.
In my position, I want to be part of people speaking up or doing something, whatever it is. I don't need to go, whatever. But I think that's maybe the role of the emotions, that they can guide you. And then nobody has to be angry or feeling angry if you don't feel it. But I think some of the strong emotions in this situation start to help you to understand where you are, what your position is.
Yeah, yeah, clear. Which one? Harriet, you just wanted to respond to?
Yeah, I wanted to say that we are not all in this together, right? Like we're all in different boats. Some people are in yachts. Some people are in the little boats that Frontex pushes back.
Yeah.
So we're clearly not all in this together. And love sometimes is the emotion, like what you protect, what you care about, is also what you know.
Yeah.
So if I really like the Netherlands, I might vote PVV to make sure that we are all safe and secure and happy together as white people, right? So, or if I want to protect the family, I might want to make sure that every threat to my family unit is removed.
Yeah.
So all these emotions, like if you claim to speak about love, what do you exclude in order to protect that love? If you speak about anger, what does that mean about what you actually like in the world, right?
Yeah.
Like something has to matter. You have to care about something in order to become angry. So I think those are really important things to keep in mind.
Yeah.
But especially that we're not all in this together. Not at all.
We're not in this. We're in the same storm, but we're in different boats. Some people are in storm protective super yachts. Okay.
They are causing the storm.
Okay. That's interesting. Thank you. Nela?
Yeah, a few things came to mind. So one is we are all born with the capacity to protest. You know, if you look at a baby of a newborn baby, you know, 1 day old, you will see it protests when a need is not met. So it's so human to do so.
That's interesting. Sorry, you got me there. You got me there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then another thing, when we speak about anger, you know, I think it's important to discriminate what we are actually speaking about because it's a scale. There is a thing that's called healthy aggression. And healthy aggression is the capacity to set boundaries.
Okay.
If you look at like a nest of newborn puppies, and, you know, they're exploring and they're crawling over each other. And then one, you know, finds with its mouth, it finds the leg of another one and it bites. What do you think the puppy that is being bitten does? You know, it doesn't do nothing. It responds. And it doesn't respond in a way that it you know, intends to hurt the sibling. But it will communicate like, hey, stop that. And to do so, you kind of, the puppy probably needs to bring the same energy to it in order for the message to come across. So we need access to our healthy aggression in order to say stop, not like this, and we need each other to do so.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you to all of you. I don't know, Fabian, if you want to add, or if it's all been said, we can also go to the questions.
Well, I was thinking about sharing a graph.
Microphone. Sorry.
I'm not used to this.
Sorry.
I was thinking of reflecting on anger and responsibility and share a graph maybe, but maybe we could do it differently. I'm not sure whether it would suit now, but I agree with... No, fuck it. Let's show the graph. Can we show the graph? Sorry, can I swear here or not?
Yeah, this was yes, healthy aggression.
Okay. Right.
This was healthy
so
aggression.
I want to just briefly, right? Do you guys know what a carbon budget is? Who knows what a carbon budget is? It's fine if you don't. It's okay, right? So it's the amount of cumulative emissions linearly relates to the extent of global heating, right? And what you see here, and this is something one really needs to take in, you know? This is the years, and this is the CO2 emissions in gigatons, right?
Yeah.
And what you see is, this is from 1980, right? And they're rising and rising, they're still at record highs, right? And in 1992, virtually all countries in the world promised to prevent dangerous climate change. Yeah. And they could have acted, you know, in 2000. Wouldn't have been easy, you know, no walk in the park, huh? But it would have been manageable.
Yeah.
Right. But they let it slide, and because CO2 stays in the atmosphere for hundreds, for thousands of years, right? The longer you wait, the more brutal the transition has to become, right?
Yeah.
So they have locked in the fact that there are no radical futures left, right?
Yeah.
And here, what I see here is really neglect of an order of magnitude that has never happened in human history, okay? And that is anger-inducing, right?
Yeah.
They are stealing our collective future. And every time, actually, some of my friends are getting kids, right? And I see them, and it breaks my heart, you know? It breaks my heart that this child has contributed nothing, but is getting fucked over. It's getting so fucked over by these years, decades of delay, right?
Yeah.
So I think there is absolutely an element here where we have to get angry, where we have to be mobilized through that anger. But it doesn't have to turn, it doesn't need to turn, it shouldn't turn actually into hatred, right? It shouldn't be something that eats us up, right?
Yeah.
But it has to be mobilizing, because we are now at a decade where what we do collectively will determine the future of life on Earth for centuries, for millennia to come.
Yeah.
And we have to realize this also. What is our responsibility being born into this, right? We didn't choose this.
No.
But we happen to be alive here, right?
Yeah.
And there's actually a scene in The Lord of the Rings. Sorry, I really love the movie. There's a scene in The Lord of the Rings, right? Where Frodo says, I wish the ring had never come to me. You know, I wish none of this had happened. And then Gandalf says, so do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. Right? And what I see this graph is anger, but it's also an incredible responsibility that we have in the privileged world. Not only if you're a scientist and academic, but if you just read a damn chart, you know, and look at a top-level statistic, you have a responsibility in this moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, thank you. Can we get a big round of applause for that indeed? Oh my God. Oh my God. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. That was honestly, I am driven by that. Thank you. You had your hand up. I didn't forget. You have a question for the panel. Please, if you want to stand up, that would be great.
My question. Oh, yeah. My question was related to what the question that was previously asked. Like, we do see that there is a normalization of suffering of people of color, and I come from India, and it's not just racism, but also casteism and other forms of oppression where you see this normalization of suffering happening. I was wondering, like, how much of a role do narratives play in normalizing this suffering? You know, like, when you see a certain member from the oppressed community suffering, and then and you're also repeatedly told that, oh, this is their job. Like, that's what happens in casteism, you know, that, oh, they are born to do this job. Yeah. You're repeatedly told these stories, and you're also repeatedly seeing them suffer. And how much of a role do these two narratives and the normalization play in people feeling more for like polar bears than human beings?
Thank you. Thank you so much for your question. Harriet, would you like to take it?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought it's your also your expertise, of course.
I think there's there's a lot of responsibility indeed in how you narrate climate breakdown, right? And that I think it's also important to, so before I go more into this, it's also important to think about responsibility as the ability to respond, right? So I think a lot of us here have the ability to respond, right? Like many, I assume, have a passport. Many have friends and people who might support them. Many come from money, or that you don't live on the street. A lot of you are white, which means that you are more able to respond to what's going on because of the privileges you have. And if you look at that graph, I think that also means something.
Yeah.
So that's something I wanted to say first.
Yeah.
And then, yes, indeed, like how we tell the story, if we only focus on polar bears and gorillas, or if we depict the suffering of people of color as something, as collateral damage, if we talk about statistics, if we say 17,000 barbarians rather than 1,200 people, right? That makes a difference in how you narrate it, how you tell it, and what kind of responses it brings. If you say one of those 1,200 people could have been your daughter, but you do not ask the question, one of those 17,000 people could have been your daughter, then you make a real difference in how people respond.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, especially in the Netherlands, when I either look at racism or climate breakdown, I see that the responsibility of the journalists, so maybe this is a good bridge to the other event, that the ability to respond, to really call out what's going on, to mobilize people, to make sure that those with privileges use it to defend what we have, then we see that people do not care enough to do it right, that they do not investigate how to communicate it, that they do not want to maybe portray the dangers or the humanity of the people suffering.
Yeah.
And I still think that if you see people failing, you have to step up yourself.
Yeah, to do it. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you also for asking that question. Do we have any other questions? We do. Over there, I see more than one hand popping up. Okay, I want to give you all an opportunity to get your questions answered. So maybe if you can be succinct in your phrasing, and if we can be brief in our answers, we can get through as many of them. Please, go ahead.
Maybe context. So I have a privilege of talking to a lot of people high in companies and trying to, I don't know if you know the game, the climate collage, like talk about the IPCC reports with them. And I often see that even though after we did this whole workshop of all the disasters, everything that could happen, they don't move, or they still, I had this workshop within Schiphol, for example, and they said, well, I don't feel guilty. And this game, or it's not even a game, the workshop really ends in like complete climate disaster, chaos, everything. So my question is, even if the facts don't change people's wish to act, how do I hold that conversation for people to actually act?
Yeah. If facts doesn't do it, then what does, basically? Okay. Who would like to take that?
Well, I think we are all forced to live like we live, right? Like you're forced to go to work if you want to pay rent for your house. We're born in a fossil capitalism, and we cannot change it. So we are forced to be complicit in a system of suffering. But if we would use force to stop being complicit in this system of suffering, we are doing something wrong, or we are stepping out of line, or we are transgressing by saying no. And I think this is really interesting. We are being forced right now to live in a way that is complicit with suffering. but we cannot use force to stop it. Okay, Fabian.
Yeah, that's a great angle actually, because it's very different from what I wanted to say. It's not a facts problem, right? It's really not a facts problem, right? I mean, we had the 6th IPCC last year, not the first, right? So it's really a problem of connecting to what is at stake, right? And there you touch on something very deep, because to me it's also not clear how that happens. You know, it happened to me very late. 3 years ago, 4 years ago, right? I lived all my adult life without thinking. Well, I thought about it, right? I knew about it. I read in the news, but I didn't connect to it. I didn't connect to it as being an issue that you engage in struggle over, you know. And so when we did an action, also we went to the Super Yacht Forum, you know. We infiltrated it, and then we gave speeches, and I also talked with the people there, right? And they were also like, yeah, you know, it's my job, and what can I do as an individual, and so on. They didn't connect to with what is at stake. So I think, I'm not sure what the exact game is really, but I would say, well, there has to be a space. And maybe, you know, that's not the right space. You go there where they work, you know, they have like a busy schedule, meeting and so on. That's not where you open up to the reality of what is at stake. So there has to be some kind of setting that you engineer where you allow the people to open up their emotions. And then I think, you know, things might start to happen. But they usually don't when you just tell them about the goddamn carbon budget.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for answering that. Thank you for asking the question. You also have a question. Would you like to step up? Yeah, thanks.
Hello, and thank you. This has been an amazing talk by everybody. But yeah, I think my question comes from the idea of like redefining the human in the context of the climate crisis. And yeah, I think my question is like very broad, but also specific for everybody, is like, what are we trying to either protect or save when we're talking about this? Because we're always talking about this future, but what is that future? And I don't know if saving is the right term or protecting is the right term either. But it's difficult to see forward when I don't know anything now that is worth, or it's pretty bleak. But yeah, I think, what are you individually trying to, and why are you in this?
Nice question. Thank you so much. Thanks. Nela, would you like to go first? You got your microphone up.
Yeah. I don't really know if I got your question, but I do have a response. So let's see if it matches. Yeah, we are really in the unknown. We're really in the unknown. And we don't really know if we are hospicing, is that a word? Like, yeah, hospicing or birthing something, or both at the same time. We don't know where this ends. And somehow holding both possibilities. Yeah, with curiosity and kindness. I don't know, yeah, that's came up for me. Is that an answer to your question?
Yeah. Anybody else wants to add to that? Rembrandt?
Yeah, the word has been used already, so we don't know. It's the unknown, staying with the unknown. That comes up with me. And if we would have more time, we could have a longer conversation. Another thing that comes up to me is that in our system, and I'm reading about it now or talking about it, and this is a little bit adverse because I don't like to go into medical models, but I'm fascinated by some people who say that the Western culture puts us into the left hemisphere of our brain, which is the sort of powerful acting, solving problems, but in a very focused way, sort of like almost in a tunnel. And the right hemisphere is the one that looks at the whole, understands the whole. And so if you ask me what's my hope, or I don't know if that's what you said, but why am I in this? I feel the opportunity or the possibility that something could be born from this situation we're in, that is maybe partly traditional from older cultures, but maybe also something that awakens, or something that we've forgotten, or something that's still there as a potential. And I think that's not only a cultural problem or a psychological problem, but it's also this problem of, do we really understand ourselves? And of course, I don't have the answer there, but I think that's a very important question.
Yeah.
Stay with the question,
please.
Yeah,
thank you.
I think the question, I heard you say, like, the future is pretty bleak, right? But the world as it is already pretty bleak. So when we talk about securing or protecting, what is it that we're protecting, right? And would, like, the children who mine our rare earth minerals in Congo feel like this is the world we want to continue? Yeah. Or the Palestinians in Gaza were being killed. Is this the world we want to continue? Yeah. Bangladeshi people who make our clothes, etc., etc. Is this what we want to secure and protect? And if we talk about security and protection, or about our future being stolen from us, whose future? What kind of future? What does it mean? And therefore, I think it's, for me, it's really important that the climate justice movement really makes those connections and thinks about suffering and harm prevention. And also when it thinks about violence, it thinks about slow violence, about institutional violence, and about the maybe physical or property damage violence in response that could diminish part of that violence. And I think that rather than protecting or securing a future, I think we should think about minimizing harm. Yeah. About caring about each other and about the things around us.
Yeah, Fabian and then Rembrandt.
Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff being said. So I was doing this course recently, Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet, by Thich Nhat Hanh. Is on this course. He wrote this book, and at some point, one of the people said, "What is the point of saving the world if you don't even enjoy it now?" Right? And I thought, well, that sounded privileged. But I also think, like, there's something there, right? So for me, part of this work is also just very fulfilling, you know, because it's aligned with your beliefs, with your responsibility, and it's like you're doing it, right? And you find community, and it's almost a question of what makes a good person, right? I mean, you're aligned with your beliefs, and you do it for a greater cause, right? There's a sense of meaning, of purpose to be derived here that you don't get from, I don't know, buying an SUV or deflating one. Well, maybe deflating one. But so, you know, so there's a sense of purpose here. You can call this the Zen of climate activism, right? Yeah. There's something in here. But also, as you said, there's something with climate change, and this is kind of Naomi Klein's line, right? Climate change versus capitalism, right? There's something interesting here where the system that we've built over the last 500 years, Fabian Scheidler calls it the mega machine. It's really a wonderful book, The End of the Mega Machine, right? There's a possibility here to have a radically different, better, more just, more equitable, more fun a world, society for the majority of the people, right? Yeah. Which we don't have here. Right. So it's really also an opportunity. But realistically, I feel the choice I think it's like this. The choice is basically between 2 degrees, 2.5 degrees, 3 degrees, end of organized human society, also in the West, and ecofascism, right? Or some form of climate breakdown, right? Because a lot of it is locked in, right? 1.7 degrees, 2 degrees, which will be radically different, radically worse in terms of the impacts, but where we somehow managed, to lift our consciousness, to relate to one another in a more profound, in a rich, in a more just way, right? And that society will probably be better than this one. Right? And that is something still worth fighting for. Also, just knowing what the counterfactual is. Because the counterfactual is very bleak indeed.
Right, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Rembrandt, not to give you pressure, but I'm going to you for final remarks. So, be as profound, as wise, as insightful as you can. No, I'm joking, no pressure.
Well, I thank you for this only tiny task. I'm not going to take the floor for long, but since you invite me, I think there's a couple of things to say, and of course we can talk. But one thing that I like to remind us of is that we are here on the invitation of Pakhuis, Zwijger, and the project headed by the people we are. And that project, I think, is a very important project because it is a project where we cross boundaries, where we sit together to share and find meaning and understand, not from our own study or our own reading books, but really to do it together. I hope we've been able to be a little bit of an example of that. Not that it's meant to be the best example, but right.
Yes.
And I think that that's very important because in doing this, we cannot be alone. We need to find other people.
Yeah.
And this could be the most important lesson is to also look for the people that are the not usual suspects. So the people that you feel, well, I don't know if I like that person or if that person thinks the same like me. Find the people that maybe think differently.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important.
Yeah.
I'm on LinkedIn and I don't know. I don't know any longer why, because I'm really experiencing these bubbles.
I thought
all these people say the same thing.
Yeah, I thought you were going to do.
That's not helping me.
Follow me on LinkedIn.
No, not at all.
You know,
I have not made any advertising for myself. No. So the point is, and I think
bring in new people.
What I like to say as a that's we hope to show how it can be enriching or important or meaningful if you meet people that you haven't met before or that have different ideas.
Yeah, thank you so much. I do think that that's a very good note to end on, because it's also homework in a way, right, for everyone. When you go back to your daily work life, people that you interact with, try and find those that are perhaps indeed not your usual suspects. Everybody, can I get a big round of applause for this amazing panel right here? Honestly, thank you so much. Oh my God. You guys have no idea. There have been like a bazillion moments where I was like, oh my God, this is so wise. This is resonating. This is an aha moment. So honestly, from my side to you, thank you so much. I think there were a lot of lessons that we collectively had, right? Doing it together is the way to go. We spoke about also what you said, Fabian, like the responsibility that we have with the time that we're given, the responsibility with the miracle that we're given, as was mentioned also by you guys. Also the fact that, you know, doing it vulnerably is the purest form, and that is the courageous form. So the courage to be open and to show your emotions and to show that you care and to share that with others is so fundamental. I think, Harriet, you showed us so many insights as well into really reflecting on our own biases. And really, I like how, and I think it's fundamental how you said, we often tend to look at the climate crisis as something that happens in the future, whereas it's already affecting the most vulnerable communities, often marginal communities around the world. So the fact that we don't always see that yet, what does that mean? What lies underneath it? And that there's something there that also needs to be tackled in this journey. So I would say let's continue to do this all together. I want to thank you so much. You were a lovely audience. Thank you for interacting, for asking your questions, for sharing your own personal stories, for being courageously vulnerable here yourselves. I really appreciate that. You were a sharp, amazing, wonderful audience to have. Once again, this was the first in a series, so there is much more to follow, folks. So if you're gonna walk home in a little bit, you're like, oh my God, I want more of that. Do not worry, there is more where this came from. Again, as I said, it's Collaborations for Future Foundation. We are Social Design, Showdown, and Pakhuis Zwijger that are responsible for this series. So maybe we can get a big round of applause for them for taking the initiative to organize this. I will say the next session will take place on the 8th of February. It is in Eindhoven. For those of you who know, that's a little towards the south, close to my hometown, Helmond. So make sure to visit it. If you want to join, please do. It's about how we talk about the climate crisis. It's something that we touched upon briefly today, but we will go much deeper into that on that day. Finally, we still have a long road ahead together. So I would say, yeah, let's do this together. If I can end on one final note, and it touches upon what you were also sharing, Fabian, is we've locked in changed already. The world is going to change, and the status quo is a turbulent one. And if there's nothing to hold on, if the status quo is not something that you can hold on to and that you can ground yourself with, you got to find something to hold on to in the process. The status quo is going to be turbulent, so that's not the thing to do. But we have each other. And if we hold each other's hands and if we collectively go through this journey together, then we have some steadiness collectively. Yeah, a little too cheesy, but I do truly mean it. I will take the risk of being cringy and cheesy, because I genuinely do think it's so important that we support each other in this journey. So once again, thank you so much, and then we hope to see you at the next one. Thank you so much.